In today's video, I'm going to share my impressions of the Godox V1 for Canon camera systems. If you're using Nikon, Fuji, whatever, Sony, it's pretty much the same flash, which has a benefit for me because I decided to pick up this third-party flash, and I will discuss why. I can talk about a flash that a lot of you are probably using or considering, and not just Canon people. So why even make this video? If you watch my channel, you know I'm really not about gear, but the gear we use is important, of course, and I like helping people, and I know this is going to be a realistic question for people. Should they get the Canon flash or get the Godox flash? And I'll talk about why I decided to pick up the Godox flash, and then I will share my impressions of it. And my impressions of it aren't going to be like, what's better, which is best, which has better specs and more features. I don't care. I genuinely don't care about that stuff that much. My perspective is going to be, how is it as a tool for professional event photography, and how does it compare to your other tools available? And that's it. I don't really care that much about the other stuff, and I'm not going to do like a detailed comparison by showing you what the flash looks like when you fire it or any of that. I might down the line, but for now, we're sticking to impressions. So the reason I decided to pick up the Godox V1 was a variety of reasons, really. One, I didn't need another flash, but because my workload is continuing to increase, I found myself in a situation where I need extra gear for people that are shooting for me. I'm a relationships first type of person, and of course the quality of the work matters, but I prefer to work with people that I know and trust rather than people that I might not know and trust super well but have a great portfolio, that kind of thing. My approach to building out my business has always been to like foster relationships, find people that really want to learn from the ground up, and kind of take them under my wing. So I found myself in a situation where I have people shooting for me that I trust, but they don't have the gear they need. And so I decided to pick up this flash so I would have a backup piece of equipment for them. I don't make gear review videos, and almost to a fault, I probably should make some. The reason is that I believe in teaching people first, and the gear we use matters less than the skills we bring to a job, but as event photographers, what we use, of course, doesn't matter. The gear we use can open up possibilities that we might not have with other pieces of equipment, that kind of thing. So I do think it's important, and my experience and why I decided to get this flash versus another Canon flash, I think might be helpful to other people. So for me, first of all, if it was between the Canon flash and a third party and they were about as good, I would just get the Canon flash because I would probably trust it a little bit more. I think they probably have a better track record. This piece of equipment, while not cheap, $500, is going to be used for 10 plus years. I don't recall how long I've been using this, but it's going to be used for a very long time. And I think over that amount of time, $500 is not a lot to spend. And even if the Godox was $150 cheaper, and I think it's about that, actually no, it's almost twice as less than half the cost, or it's a little bit more than half the cost actually. But for me, over 10 years, it's not a big deal. However, the V1 does have a few features that the Canon doesn't have, and what you're going to assume is more features is better. A lot of people will, and if you watch YouTube videos, often they're not from working photographers, and so they're not really comparing or talking about things from the perspective of a working pro. They're really just comparing stats. And that doesn't really tell you what a piece of equipment is really like to use. So this is going to be my first impressions video. I haven't used this on the job yet. I have 3 jobs this week that I'm going to have the opportunity to use it on, or my second shooter will. But I want to share my first impressions because there are some differences. Now, first of all, I don't care about the round head. From what I've seen on watching other videos, it seems to be helpful. I don't really care about the shape, but I've actually found that the most distinguishing feature of this flash, the round head, is not the round head really, but the magnetic system, filter system that comes with it. And I'll get back to that. When holding these 2 flashes, I want to start here. The Godox has a very loud sound when you turn it on. I think I've had another Canon flash that did that. It feels more modern. Does it feel cheaper? Yeah, no. There's like parts of it that feel much nicer than the Canon and parts that don't. What it feels more like to me is a cheaper flash that is more modern, whereas the Canon is a bit older in design, but probably is more premium. So, for example, I like the light of the Godox. It's a lot more appealing than the light, more appealing and brighter than the light of the Canon. It's got a bright blue versus a dim green. But here's the thing, that might be by intent by Canon. They maybe just wanted something that wouldn't be too bright and distracting or call attention to the photographer. So sometimes something that seems really cool and smart might not actually, you know, on the surface it might be cool, but it doesn't mean it's better. Overall, if you've used a Canon flash, I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but not as much as it should be, or I would like it to be. For example, I like the Canon system so far a bit more for changing your flash to be a trigger versus a receiver. Here I am avoiding master and slave, but master and slave trigger, that kind of thing. I like that Canon, you can use exposure compensation a bit quicker, in my opinion. I like pressing the center button rather than pressing the little one to the left and then changing your exposure compensation. That's just a feature I really prefer. Maybe it's just muscle memory. We can talk about the battery. That's another thing I've noticed. So another thing where you can be like, oh, this is really smart and better, but is it? So the Godox has a rechargeable battery, and that I do like. I haven't seen how long it lasts yet, but there are pros and cons to having a lithium ion. One is that if it runs out and you don't have a backup, you don't have a backup. But with AA batteries, which the Canon uses, you immediately can just throw in new Canon batteries. Now, of course, you can buy a second battery for the Godox. It looks like it's $50, and you can easily rationalize, well, okay, it's $50 more, and it's still like way cheaper than the Canon, and that is true. The thing about the battery, it's kind of cool. It's a minimal design, which seems really cool, where you can see through the flash, actually, and you slide it right in, and it locks. Kind of cool that it doesn't have a flap, but then you have to remember having, I don't know what to call it, a flap. It's probably it's probably sealed a lot better. Now, I believe this has some weather sealing, and I'll have to check, and if you know off the top of your head, put it in the comments, whereas I don't think this has any. The reality for me is I have almost never had to shoot a flash in the rain. I did like one time. And so I don't really make my purchasing decisions on the 1% chance of something happening personally. Next, another thing I could just kind of mention is the legs, the little, I don't know what you call this, like collar thing. But on the Godox, they give you some extra base in the back. So theoretically, it'd be harder for it to fall over that way. However, I noticed the Canon, yeah, honestly, I was gonna say I think the Canon, like it's top heavier, meaning, or front heavier. It does seem to have maybe a little bit of, now, again, I've never had an issue with the Canon shoe mount thing, legs, but the Godox does seem to have more stability because it has some legs in the back. Who knows if that really helps. Okay, next I think we'll talk about another little cool feature, which I could have talked about earlier. The Godox, when you do change how the flash will behave, like from master, slave, that kind of thing, it actually changes color. And when it is orange, you know it is in slave mode, which could be really cool, so you could see at a glance from far away that it is being triggered or will be triggered. But again, cool, but that will never really be necessary. I've never positioned a slave flash and then didn't know what I set it to, you know? I set it to slave, I positioned it. So not a horrible feature, but kind of cool, I guess. Again, I don't know how practical it will be in the actual shooting. So The next like physical impression I have is that, again, I believe the Canon has some weather sealing, and it has like a rubberized gasket at the bottom, and it has that, I don't know what you call the locking mechanism, where it's a slide lock. It's very secure, and I like it quite a bit. It's very sturdy. I've never had a problem with it. My understanding is that prior to this flash, Godox did not use that system. They actually used the system in the old 430EX, and like, I think I can't recall if my old 580EX had this system or not, but it had like a wheel lock, which you can get really tight, which can be really good or really bad, because sometimes it could get difficult to take off, really difficult even if you over tighten it. Again, so there's no such thing as like, there's a point where tight enough is tight enough, and I don't really see any benefit to like screwing it really tight. So I always preferred that slide locking mechanism. All right, let's talk about the history of flashes for people that don't really know it. And I'm sorry, this might be a long video because of it. And I'll talk about my own personal history with flash as well. But when I started as a professional photographer, third-party flash units were not an option. They were not nearly as good. I don't think the value was even that great. It was like cheaper, but also a lot cheaper in quality. And so it wasn't really an option. You know, I really do love that Godox and all these other companies are showing us all how much we've been taxed by first-party gear. And I do anticipate that this flash will probably be comparable at the least with the Canon flash. I may even like it more, I don't know yet. But I started out with this right here actually. This was my very first flash, and I've had it for, I guess, 12, 13 years or whatever. And it did the job, but eventually I wanted something a little bit more, I guess, premium, more advanced. I wanted to have a second flash so I could trigger this one. This one, oddly, was the most reliable flash I've ever had, and it continues to be. It doesn't drain batteries too fast or any of that. But, it is a little bit more limited, but you can do everything, all the basic stuff, okay? Pretty much wouldn't recycle as quick if you had a good flash. Mine was a dud. My 580 had problems from the start. You can zoom in and out with it. You could do high-speed sync, second curtain. You could shoot in manual, TTL, pretty much everything you needed, but I believe it had a smaller output and didn't recycle as fast, as we mentioned. You had this little card, which would be for when you're shooting really wide. You pop it down. But you did not have a fill card. My second flash was a 580EX, which I think the Mark II, which had, like the 600EX, a little white card in addition to the little, I don't know what you call it, it's like a little diffusion grid thing for shooting wide. The white card was cool because if you're pointing your flash straight up and you're pretty close to your subject matter, then what's going to happen is you might get shadows from below and you will not get a catch light. By using the fill card, you're filling in shadows a bit more, but you're getting a catch light, which can be nice. If you have enough distance from you and your subject, you probably wouldn't need it. You can just do like a 45-degree angle bounce, and it will bounce 45 degrees down, and then you can get a nice catch light in the eye. Personally, I always opt for bouncing off a corner or a wall if I want a nice kind of like window light effect with the flash. So I rarely used it. So back in the day, there was a website which you may or may not be familiar with called, I believe, The Strobist. And he really did bring the use of flash to the masses in a lot of ways. It was like an early website when there weren't like a bazillion websites out there talking about it. He really got into detail about how you can be more creative while using flash. And it kind of set a trajectory, I think, in the industry in a lot of ways, where if you watch YouTube videos, you would think flash is always a better option than available light, even shooting portraits. I don't agree, but that's off topic. But back then, one big concern we all had was when you were photographing in tungsten light. Tungsten light, you have to remember, the camera is not like the human eye, so it is color correcting for one light source. It is balancing for that light source. So, for example, right now, I'm being balanced for like daylight. However, if there were a tungsten light, a lamp behind me, it would look more orange than it should. Or if you're balanced for tungsten light, daylight looks really blue in comparison. And so we needed a solution to that, and there weren't even products made third party, let alone first party. So what I would do, and a lot of people would do, is we would buy these sheets of these gels, and then you would gel your flash in order to balance your flash to the tungsten light available in a banquet hall or something like that. If you didn't do that, you ended up with really orange images, or you would have to try to shut out the light completely, the ambient light. So we would like cut them into pieces with Velcro, and then I would get like Velcro tape on the side so you could just kind of Velcro it across the flash. Eventually Canon, and I think it was starting with the first 600EX2, they started including those in the case, which is pretty cool, and that's something Godox doesn't have, but I'll get into why. This case that it came with the little, I can't believe, I started this video without knowing the name, and I'm not going to stop it to figure it out, but the little feet stand, it came with a diffusion cap, which Canon flashes never came with, Nikon neither. And it came with two gel caps that would basically balance a half a balance and a full balance to tungsten light. Really cool, but now we don't really see tungsten light anymore. You might get LED lights that are kind of balanced that way, warmed up, but they're not truly tungsten. I find I almost never use this, and I've rarely found when I do that it's that effective or that it's a look I really want. Okay, so cool, we have a cap, all that, but now we have the Godox. And I think what I like more than anything, I'll do some testing and I'll know if I like this round shape or not. I have a theory that's not really discussed as to why people are liking it, other than what people have said. But I'll get into that in another video. So the Godox, you can buy a whole kit. And what I really love so far, immediately, is that it is magnetized. And we even have gels, by the way. It looks like a green one, which would be for fluorescent. It looks like, what do I have, like a total of 4? I haven't even opened that yet. But with the Godox, first of all, this is always like, it's sturdy and clunky, you know? It's kind of like a clunky process of putting it on. But with the Godox, I can simply take any of these modifiers and just pop it right on. Here's a grid. This is the one I'm most excited about, actually, believe it or not, because one thing I will do to dress up my detail shots is I will create a rim light with my second flash. So my main flash, I'll probably bounce off a wall or a corner, and then at an angle, I will create a rim light with my second light. You can zoom in with the flash, but being able to grid your flash is pretty cool. Back in the day, I had to make my own like snoot with cardboard and then paint them inside black. And yeah, it was cool to make your own stuff, but this is so easy. You pop it on. Here we have like a diffusion thing. Now, I don't know when practically I would use it because presumably it's like for when you're shooting bare bulb, kind of. You soften it a bit. You still have a similar intensity, I suppose. No, reduction in relative power output. I don't know how to phrase that. But I feel like a lot of this is included to like say, oh, look at all the stuff you have and all the creative options you have. But realistically, I don't know how much of this I would actually use. This is a cool one, very simple. So there's another attachment here. So basically, in my video last week, I talked about how I worked with a guy who would make his own diffuser out of like cutting out a milk carton in the shape of a leaf. Something like this, but a little bit bigger. So you have a nice large fill card, which would theoretically be a lot better than the Canon one. The larger the fill card, the more effective it's going to be at diffusing your lights. And this is probably the one most people are going to use, similar to the Canon cap I have on now. Would be just that kind of dome. So that's all cool. I'm I'm excited to find out, though, how much of this is going to actually be useful for me. Some feedback I've gotten from more than one photographer that is using one of these Godox flashes is that amazing flash, once in a while the color temperature is not accurate. And to me that sounds like I don't want to deal with that, but I have to see again how practical or how like bothersome will that actually be when actually working. So the last bit I do want to talk about is just a little bit more about the value of this flash and why I decided to get it and why I think a lot of people are probably just going to get this flash rather than the Canon. So I'm pretty excited about what Canon is doing. You can get an affordable flash trigger by Canon now, whereas just a few months ago you couldn't. So the new hot shoe, which will now power accessories, means they can make accessories without screens that are cheaper, which you can control in the flash menu system of the camera. However, to use it on like my R6, which I'm recording on, I would have to buy an adapter in order to give my hot shoe that compatibility. All in total, it was like 160 bucks. And I was like, I could just buy that and then start triggering my Canon flash off camera. But at the same time, I could buy a second Godox flash for not like that much more, and then have another flash that can now trigger this Godox flash. So there is value in like a flash being cheaper, because I don't always look at it as like what's the cheapest. Like for me, ultimately, the cost isn't that big of a deal until I start thinking about what else I could buy for that money I would be spending. Now, if you're just trying to buy stuff on a budget, I think you don't need to watch my video. You'll probably know that just starting off with the Godox would make sense for you. For me though, I'm like a little bit more torn, but it is what it is. We'll see how much I like it. So this was a bit longer of a video than I expected it to be, although of course I knew it was going to be a little bit long. If you made it to the end, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you, especially if you want help with your event photography business or your skills as an event photographer. Hit me up on Patreon. That's the best way to support me, and it helps me support you further by giving you portfolio reviews, critiques, business coaching. I can help you learn to write proposals, which you will have to write eventually as you move up in event photography and do larger corporate events, that kind of thing. If I'm missing something on Patreon, there's a level you'd like to see, a level of support, or there is something you'd like to get from me, like another way I can help you, let me know, and I will see if I can make that happen. Thank you all for watching. I appreciate all of you.